Hello, everyone. I'm John Self, and welcome to our free webinar on communicating your value. This is a really important thing because most people think they do a great job and they really struggle. So, what we're going to do today is cover some of the issues that really impact people in their job interviews. And this whole issue of communicating your value is where a lot of people stumble, fumble, and get eliminated. And as hard as it is to get to the interview table today, I hate to see that happen to candidates. I did this for 27 years, and so we're going to talk a little bit today about our the organization and my experience, that sort of thing. So let me get all this stuff out of the way, as we say. There you go. So I want to get busy here and share with you some information that I think will be very helpful to you. Okay. And this is kind of the founding principle here, and I use this because in 27 years of talking to people around the country and across the globe, interviewing executives, one of the things I found is that most executives believe they communicate their value effectively. Most do not. Most do not. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some statistics on that in just a minute. But first, let me introduce myself. Now, I fully understand this is not about me, it's about you. But I want you to know, if you don't know me, what a little bit of my background is, because I do have a lot of expertise in this field. I began my career as a reporter, gosh forbid, for the regional morning daily in Tyler. Then I served as what they call a slot editor for the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, where I made up all the inside pages and decided which news played where. When I then moved on to the metropolitan desk of the Houston Post, and they assigned me to be the night crime writer and an investigative reporter, a job that I genuinely loved, but it was full of blood and gore. And after about 3 years, I decided I had seen enough. I became the coordinator of community relations at Herman Hospital. And it was just probably the best decision I ever made in my life, aside from getting married to my wife. Program developed. I was the coordinator of the launch of their very famous Life Flight program. When I started, we had one helicopter shown here. They now have 5 or 6, and they make hundreds and hundreds of flights a month. I moved on to become the vice president of business development for aviation medical, and I set up the next 14 hospital-based air ambulance programs, 13 of which are still in operation, something I'm pretty proud of. So I've had a lot of experience in recruiting, because I help the hospitals recruit their nurse crews. I've helped the company select pilots that would fit well in the healthcare environment. And went on to work for an investor-owned management company, LifeMark. Built a regional hospital management service company. I took over; they had 3, and when I left, they had 42. I founded a turnaround firm for rural community hospitals, and back then in the 80s, there were tons of problems, and we spent a lot of time getting a lot of those hospitals ship shape. Most of them are still open today. As a search partner, I've worked across 38 states, US, Alaska, Hawaii, and in 6 countries on 4 continents. So I've had not only a lot of experience interviewing in the United States, but internationally. And that's a little bit of a different sort of flavor. So it's something I've enjoyed doing a lot. I've interviewed probably more than 9,000 executives. That's a lot. And that's why I can say that most executives think they do a great job communicating their value. What they try to do is answer the questions, and they don't take control of their narrative. So we're going to talk about that today. And for 10 years, I taught the executive interviewing course for a global professional association. If you're in healthcare, you know about the ACHE, and I taught for them for 10 years. Now let's talk about our agenda today. And we're going to try to keep it down to 45 minutes. So let's start off by talking about the state of the market. Now, a lot of people say, well, the job market's good. It is, but second, we're going to talk about what is the big problem? Why are people struggling so much? If the market's good, what's the problem? Then we're going to focus on what you can do to improve your chances to accelerate your job search. And then finally, we'll review the takeaways and give you a special offer. That we're not going to spend a lot of time trying to sell you on something. That's not the way we work. If you have a need, if you think this information is useful, then we'll teach you how to use it and help you polish your skills. Interviewing is where the jobs are won or lost. And so you cannot go in and think you know how to interview because those old rules don't apply anymore. So let's get busy. So the state of the market. Well, the broader market, as you see every month when we have the jobs report, is quote officially healthy. It's a 4.2 unemployment rate. Now that's a tick or two higher than they probably would like, but it's not full employment, but it's close to it. However, executive and management hiring does not reflect that compelling, does not reflect that. And there's compelling anecdotal evidence to confirm that. Now, some of the problems in the executive market are really related to the COVID crisis. We had the big 2009, 2000, 2008, 2009, 2010 near depression where thousands and thousands were laid off, but we began to recover from that. And in 2010 and 2000, uh, uh, 2020, excuse me, we had the COVID shutdown and we had a huge spike in unemployment, probably even bigger than with the near depression in 2008, 2009, and 2010. So it's shut down, people were furloughed. And then when things began to improve, companies started bringing people back and then decided not to bring all of them back. Now, the tech industry has been particularly brutalized. They have lost thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs. And if you're trying to get into an entry level position in tech, you've got to have a lot of contacts who can introduce you, and you've got to be extremely sharp and really proficient. So tech has been hit pretty hardly, but broadly, the layoffs appear to be strategic and not economic. When there is a big downturn, like the market shuts down with COVID, or in the real estate recession in 2008, 9, and 10, you see widespread layoffs, thousands and thousands with each company. So most of what's happening today is very targeted strategic layoffs versus economic layoffs. Now, healthcare is beginning to show some stress. We reported on that in our newsletter, Guiding Your Career Report, this morning in our Substack newsletter. If you don't get it, please check it out. It's johngsells.substack.com. And we write Monday through Friday at 6:30 a.m. Okay, what else is happening in the market? Well, something called AI augmented recruitment. Now, most of you have heard about all this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But really, uh, while the broader job market remains healthy, there are problems with the automation. People were not customizing their resumes, and they were not touching on keywords and phrases, which the algorithms required. The bigger problem, though, is people were depending on the applying online. That's the most inefficient way you can apply, is online. So that's why you hear these horror stories that people have applied 150, 200, 250 times to find just to get one or two interviews. That's terrible. So you want to have a network. And if you don't have a network, one of the things you're going to get as part of the offer today is if you let us know, we'll download to you a copy of our workbook, Networking 3.0. Networking is absolutely not important, not critical. It's essential going forward. If you don't have one, you will probably set your career back a great deal. So avoid that. So we have a lot of technology. A lot of people were struggling with the technology. A lot of the technology is not yet ready for prime time, but it got rolled out in a hot hurry. And so some of these algorithms aren't really accurate, and it's really, really discouraging. Now, the other thing you need to know is that a lot of the jobs that were posted and are continue to be posted are ghost jobs. A lot of companies just keep jobs up. They're not even looking at candidates. They're not active. They keep them up to quote keep their name in front of the potential employees. Well, that's kind of a cruel deal, but that's sometimes with corporate HR, their logic defies reason. So so those things are contributing to the problem. But the key thing is there are fewer managers and slots for managers and executives. Now, the other thing is we have what is called a post-COVID hangover. people when they started bringing people back, executives said, with everybody kind of working remote, still hybrid, we don't need as many people in the office, as many vice president as many administrators, and so they didn't bring people back. They converted furloughs into layoffs. The other thing that's impacting the job market is something called job extension. This is where you may, let's just use healthcare as an example. You have a really good CEO at a bigger hospital in a region with a cluster of other smaller regional hospitals around. And instead of having a quote CEO in each one of those hospitals, what they do is they will take a CEO from the strongest CEO in the region, make him the regional CEO, and then have chief administrative officers at those smaller hospitals. And so there you lose 4 or 5 CEO positions right there. And so job extension has continued to grow in popularity, and I suspect it will continue to grow in the future. Now, the other thing is the AI automation issue. Now, when you talk about economics, everybody says, well, those tax cuts that are going to be really good are going to trickle down and help everybody lift all the boats, which is very rarely true. That's the big political lie. But what we do have in automation and with AI is we have something called trickle up impact. And this is really important for you to remember, because if you have fewer supervisors, fewer managers, you don't need as many executives. And we're already seeing that across the board. Is that that's one of the reasons that companies do not have as many executives as they have had in the past, is the trickle up impact. So what's the big problem? Well, the fact that there's a lot of people looking for work. Those people that are out there jump into the market when they lose their job or get laid off. They panic. They got to get a job immediately, and they just start slinging resumes left, right, and center. That's not the way you do it now. And if you want to try to do it that way, because that's what makes you feel comfortable, it's going to significantly extend your job search. It's going to take a lot longer for you to find a job unless you adapt. The rules have changed, and most people, they struggle because they don't believe it's true. And then 4 months later, they go, well, I think it's true. And if you're on a short severance, that's a waste of time you can't afford anymore. Now, as I said earlier, online applications are inefficient. You must build a network. You must build a network. Networking 3.0, which I've really done a lot of work on, is really built around the concept of having a career plan. Now, people say, that I was told career plans are stupid. We don't need those. Okay, so where are you going to target your networking? Unless you have some parts of the country where you'd like to live and you want to be diversified in your selections, so that you're not going to pick one area that may be more prone to layoffs or economic downturn than the other. You've got to target your networking to geographic areas and employers. If you just have a bunch of people scattered willy-nilly, the chances are they're not going to have the information that you need to help you get introduced. So target your regions, target the companies you'd like to work for, and build your network that way. That's Networking 3.0, and that's part of the free downloadable workbook that we'll share with you for being registered today. Now, the other thing that we keep talking about is the impact of automation. And that's only going to intensify. Within probably 3 to 5 years, the people that are doing the initial telephone screening or the video screening will be avatars. They're not going to be real people. A lot of references are going to be automated. They're not going to be done by real people. Now, you submit a resume, and the computer decides who gets to meet with the recruiter. Even if you have somebody who says, look, submit to this person. I know them. I'm going to put in a good word for you. They still like it to go through the system. And so you have to be sure your resume is customized. And most people, not understanding the rules, don't customize. And it's an automatic elimination, almost guaranteed. As I said earlier, a big part of this problem is more demand for fewer jobs. And it's not uncommon to apply for say a chief pharmacy officer or a chief operating officer and be competing with anywhere from 100 to 200 or 300 people, depending on the compensation, and the industry. So you need to understand that it's extremely competitive. That means you also have to change your strategy in job interviewing. The way you've always done it in the past won't get you to where you need to be. So you have to learn the new rules of job search. Finally, the big problem, employers, because there are more people looking for jobs than are out there, actually jobs out there, they are able to be extremely selective. So you have to be really, really well prepared at every phase of the search so that you can advance. Your job at each level is not to get the job. Your job at each level is to extend to the next level. So you have to stay focused. Don't start looking at what it's going to be like to spend all that money that you're going to make, because you'll probably get eliminated. Focus on the next step of the search process. And remember, employers are being extremely, extremely selective. Now, there are things you can do, and you must do these things. And I know people don't like to be told, hey, you got to do this, but you really need to. Because if you don't, you're just adding weeks and months onto your job search. So, and if you have a 90-day, if you have a 90-day severance, guess what the time to hire sequence today is? Anywhere between 8 to 14 months if you're an executive. 8 to 14 months. And most executives, even if they have a good severance, it doesn't go beyond a year unless they were more senior in the organization and stayed long and been there a long time. So the average severance is going to be around 90 days. A good severance for executives is going to be around 180 days. But if you're not going to find a job until the 8 to 14 month range, you're going to have a gap. And that gap means you're going to have to draw out of savings or draw down on your retirement. If it's in certain types of retirement accounts, you're going to have a penalty for withdrawal, and you'll also have a tax penalty. So your net actually that you're taking down is going to be not as good as you probably need it to be. So don't waste time. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. You need to go out and start customizing your resume. And you do that by reading the job search, the summary is, and look for the opportunities. Sometimes it's very subtle. And so what you have to do then is do your research, because you may know somebody in your network that knows that organization that can say, boy, is it a cluster, you know what? So, I mean, those are important things to know. And so you need to do your research. You may know a vendor that does business with that organization. Hey, what are they looking for? If you have a network, that networking person may not be able to refer you, but that networking representative may know what the job is and tell you what they're looking for so that you can tailor your message specifically to that employer. So do your research on the employer. Now, when you look at that job summary, you want to break it down and by categories. And there's usually 5 to 6 categories. And in those categories, there's a worksheet. You can break it all out, and you can identify the key issues they're going to have. You identify your key strengths. You identify your stories that you want to use to illustrate those things. And so you break it down. Every interview, you break down the job and prepare for it using that what we call a oh gosh, we changed the name of it, core and categorical form, and it really works well. Now, I've talked to a lot of clients that we've given that to, and they've used it, and they said, only about 30-40% of the time do they ask the specific questions we anticipated, but we were so confident going in because we knew we were ready and we could answer most of the information. And so even though they didn't ask the specific question, we still did a better job. And and a lot of those people got compliments from the interviewers for being prepared and for being so confident. So the core and categorical form will help you do that. And that's why it's important to break down each position by human resources, finance, operations, marketing, those types of things. Finally, what you have to do is communicate your value. Now, when they ask you, tell me about yourself, they're not asking you to go through your resume. That's just a winding, 2 or 3 or 5 minute. I've even seen them go 20 minutes, for gosh sakes. Tell them who you are, why you want the job, what you're good at, your strengths, your value proposition. This is what they're interested in. They're not interested in, every place you've been. They've already read that. They want to know what you can do for them in that position. That's why you need to know what their real true needs are. Every step of the interview process. What are they looking for? What are the issues, key issues? If nobody can tell you, then that's something you might want to be very cautious about. Now, if you've been struggling to find a job, sometimes you got to take what you can get. But you always want, and then when you do that, you got to really prepare yourself on an onboarding side to be sure that you don't step in anything and then to have a quick turnaround and lose the job. So communicating your value is really important, and you have to understand. You have to understand what they're looking for, what their needs are, what their special issues are. Because if you have strength in those issues, you absolutely want to talk about those strengths and connect them specifically to those challenges. Don't assume that you can talk about your strengths and they'll sort it out for you, because they probably won't. So here's when we talk about being specific. A lot of people, and again, this is based on 30 years of search experience and coaching. And this is something, you say, well, why should we consider you for this job? Well, I'm qualified. Everybody's qualified at this point. So don't wait for them to ask. Immediately say, "I'm really qualified, and here are my qualifications, and here are some of the things that I have in terms of fellowships or certifications or specialty training that really apply to your job." Okay, make the connection. Don't assume they'll find it or figure it out. I'm experienced. A lot of people would say that. That's not enough. Everybody's experienced. Provide specifics and connect those with the employer's needs. This is value. This is what they're looking for. You can't just say, "Well, I've got 30 years experience." Big deal. Okay. I'm sorry, but you got to give them more meat. You got to show them the money. I remember that great Wendy's commercial where the little lady said, "Where's the beef?" Talking about the competitors, because Wendy's was known for having, full meat beef patties. And she would say, "Where's the beef?" Well, that's kind of what employers are telling you today. Where's the beef? They want the value. That's what they're hiring for today. You got to be a nice guy. They got to trust you. You got to be smart. You got to have good experience, but they want to know about your value. You can go to a great graduate school, but that's not necessarily value. They're not paying as much attention to those issues as they've done in the past. So you have to be very careful and very specific and connect those with the employer's needs. Again, I'm successful. Select the most relevant examples of your success and match those with the client's issues. Include quantitative examples. Now, this is one thing that people absolutely do not do, and it hurts people in the interview. When I say quantifiable examples, let's go through this here. I reduce turnover. Great. That didn't tell me anything. Doesn't communicate value. And don't use I reduce turnover by 30%. 30% of what? 30% of 30 people is not a big deal. But if you run a division and then there's 100, 1,000 or 2,000 people or 500 people, and you reduce turnover by 15% or whatever it is, you can even go in and look at what the before and after issues were, because those are the strongest comparisons. Before, our average salary was this, and we were turning over this many people every year. And by cutting that back, I saved this much money. And people say, "Well, how can you do that?" Take the average salary for the division and and do the math. How many people were turnover in the past, and what happened post your initiative? Did you have a good, strong before and after comparison? That's really, really important. I reduced expenses while improving overall operating results. Provide, again, the before and after numbers of the annual budget. Where did you achieve savings? Walk us through the process. Now, you don't want to get into a convoluted, long answer. I did this. Here's what I did. Here's what we were before. Here's what we are now. And here's how I did it, very briefly. And guess what? You can't do that unless you've prepared for the job interview. If you haven't done the preparation, it's almost impossible to give them what they're asking for. Okay. I enhance employee satisfaction scores. This is really important because it relates to turnover. You know, again, be sure that you're giving them information that relates to their needs. If they don't have a big turnover problem, then maybe don't emphasize that as much, unless there's something really novel that you created. So focus your energy, focus your details, focus your quantitative explanations on their issues. That's going back to doing your homework. I was active in the community. I used to hear that all the time. Okay, what does that mean? Describe organizations and maybe give us an example of where you managed a key project or a fundraiser, or you organize clubs for service at the state fair, or a local county fair, or the Christmas parade, whatever it is. But if you can show how demonstrate your management skills and coordination skills in a volunteer situation, that's important. Community, if you're going to be especially a community CEO of a bank, a healthcare, or a city manager, things like this, you absolutely need to have really good examples of that. Now, when you get down to describing your leadership style, don't just say servant leader. First of all, it's pretty lame. Okay, it's overused. People use it as a throwaway line. So if you're going to use servant leader as an explanation, talk about what that means to you. Make it special. Connect with them emotionally, because people will remember that. This is if you can touch them in an emotional way, this is really, really important. Now, there's some other things you can do. When you describe an accomplishment, you need to control the narrative. Don't just say, I did this, and wait for them to ask more questions. That's not being proactive with your value. Don't wait for them to ask or to move to the next question. If they don't ask and move to the next question, you've lost an opportunity. So that's really, really important. Now, here are some takeaways that I hope you'll take into consideration. That first of all, you got to understand the new rules. And the new rules are customizing resumes, doing your homework, understanding what the client's issues are. Don't just show up to answer questions. Have stories using that core and categorical form. Tell stories to illustrate your successes. People remember stories. You can't make those up on the fly. You have to think about in advance. Their key issues are this, X, Y, and Z. In finance, I did this, this, and this. You probably can remember a story or two that will, briefly, not only long, once upon a time in America, convoluted story. What you want to do is give them a quick line, a quick example. Talk about how the team was all confused and from prior leadership, and they weren't used to getting involved, and that you brought them together and energized them, and you achieved the goal. That's a story. But you want to do this so that you can show your leadership. You can show that you're focused on what they need in terms of value. So understand the new rules, understand your value. Don't just assume they're going to read your resume and figure it out, because 9 times out of 10, they won't. And when you talk about your value, you must use qualitative examples. And don't just say 95% or 50% of what. Always use a base number when you're using when you're giving percentages. Always use a base number. Employees, expenses, whatever that number is. The bigger the number, the more impressive it is. Now, one of the things people say is, "Well, I can't remember that." Don't ever say that in a job interview. That was really almost 1 and 2 strikes to get you out of the search if you couldn't remember certain things. Keep a journal. Okay. You are absolutely crazy if you're not doing that. Why? Because people are going to want more and more data. They want more and more quantitative examples, and you're not going to be able to remember it. And I guarantee you that I'm now a gentleman of a certain age with a certain color of hair, and I can tell you things I always thought I would remember. I don't. And you know why I can remember a lot of those things? Because I go back to the journal, 1986. And I, made notes about some of the accomplishments, where we signed contracts, maybe some funny little story that happened, things that would help me keep my memory sharp about my accomplishments. So please, 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 please keep a network, and please, please, please keep a journal and build your network. How does that sound? Now, you got to prepare for each interview. You do your homework, you understand your value, and you start pulling it together in a narrative message with stories. And you want to break the job down. That helps you anticipate the questions they're going to ask. And one of the little tricks you can use is, hey, if I was doing the interview, what questions would I ask me? That will take care of a lot of issues right there. So practice anticipated questions. Most people don't want to practice. Well, I'll be okay. I'm good at this. No, when you've interviewed as many people as I have, you will, if you went through that, that's almost worse than a sharp stick in the eye. But you will realize that people miss so many opportunities that might have been the difference between getting the job and not getting the job. In this market, in this market, that is so critical. Please don't do that. Don't take anything for granted. Don't say, "Oh, I'll be okay. I don't need to spend all this time preparing." The people who get the job are the people who are prepared, the people who practice, the people who got their stories that would align with the needs of the client. And when you get to the job table, if you don't get the job, you lose. You're not, "Oh, they picked somebody else." That's what you tell yourself. No, you lost. Don't become somebody who's content with losing. That's a crazy way to manage your career. Okay. Be sure to tie your answers to the client, to the employer's needs, and be positive, be enthusiastic, be authentic, because they remember that stuff. When somebody says, "Why should we hire you?" You can start off by saying, "I'm here today because I've done my homework on your organization. This job excites me because it plays to my strengths, and because I think I can be passionate and excited about being here. And when I join an organization and those three things are tricked, those boxes are checked, then I'm all in. And I can assure you, I can produce the results you're looking for." I mean, people say, "No, no, 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 you can't get that specific." Well, if you don't, somebody else will. Somebody else will get the job and you'll still be sitting on the sidelines. You've got to be prepared to stand up and say, "I can do this. I've done it in the past. Here's some examples, and know that I'm excited about this job opportunity." Sound like it. "I'm excited." Doesn't get it. Okay. You've got to show your excitement. When you get to a recruiter, whether it's corporate or whether it's even an interview team in the organization, you do not want to sit around and just have a conversation. You want to take charge of your narrative. You've got to sell yourself. Now, people go, "Oh, John, I don't like that sell stuff." Look, Daniel Pink, a great author and economist and social commentator, he said once that 8 out of 9 Americans are and 1 in 9 Americans, excuse me, 1 in 9 Americans are in sales, and so are the other 8. You have to be in sales when you go in to sell yourself to the interview table. And you want to be prepared. Salespeople will tell you they get the deal when they've done their homework, and they don't go in and just wing it. They don't shoot from the hip. Absolutely, you won't get the sale. You will not get the job. So let's talk a little bit in the final few minutes we have with you today. And I've got my chat box on, and so if you have any chats, I should have mentioned that at the first, but I forgot. If you have any chats, you can drop them in the last few minutes. I'll be happy to answer questions. If you would like to schedule a free hour coaching session, you can email me at john@johngself.com. john@johngself.com. And if you'd like a copy of the networking book, we'll be happy to send it to you. It's a downloadable PDF format. You can request the book when you set up your interview. john@johngself.com, and make reference to this webinar. Now, that offer is only going to last for about 45 days. So don't wait. Get your request in to get your free coaching session. And if you don't want to talk about interviewing, you want to talk about your resume or something else, we're happy to do that. Okay. We'll try to talk about the things that you want to address. So if you have a 1 hour free coaching session, that's free. Now, the other thing you can do is request a 25% discount on our masterclass on the Mastering the Art of the Job Interview. It's a really intense 5-week. It's a really intense, I think 6 or 8 weeks. You get 5 interview practice sessions with feedback. People say, "I never get any feedback." Well, listen, I've done thousands of interviews, and I can give you feedback. You may not like it, but I can give it to you, and I can help you structure your presentation, structure your message so that it emphasizes your value, enhances your presentation skills, and really highlights those things that you've accomplished in a quantitative way. So those are 3 things. The 25%. Now that's a $2,500 course, maybe a little bit more. They made some price changes, but it's online. Go to johngself.com, and it'll take you to our course page, and you can search through the courses we have and find the master class for interviewing. If you have questions, please email me. I mean, I do this work because I try to help people avoid making these mistakes that I saw so many people make in my 27 years of executive recruiting. So I hope this has been helpful. We're a little bit ahead of schedule today. So, okay. John, tell me how you can, let's see, I'm sorry, kind of jumbled up there. How I can anticipate the questions. Well, you break it down by categories. Most every job has the following categories. You have an HR component, that's your people. You have a financial management component, that's your budget. Or you may have a sales component, your budget versus sales. You may have a marketing component. You have governance. Now, you may not be reporting to a board, but you report to somebody in the organization. And so that you know that you're being able to talk about your philosophy of how you report and how you deal with people. That's very, very important. So those are the kind of categories. That's 4 or 5 right there. And then you start thinking about, okay, what are the strengths I have in this category? What are the examples of my successes that would apply to this job? And what questions would I ask myself? And you also want to be prepared. If you've made a big bonehead boo boo, and we all have at one time or another, prepare an answer. Okay. A lot of people go into the interviews thinking, oh, dear God, I hope they don't ask that question. Well, be prepared for it so you take that anxiety off the table. Sometimes I can sense that people are dreading that I'm going to go into a certain area they want to talk about. And then it becomes a game. Can I find the button and push it? Okay. And recruiters, I mean, when you do interviews, 4 or 5 interviews in a day, that may sound kind of bizarre, but our job is to find out what's going on with you and are you a good match for our client, not only in terms of your skills and your experience, but are you a personality match with our client? And so you want to be sure that you communicate effectively, you communicate your value effectively, you communicate your leadership style effectively. Don't just say I'm a servant leader or don't say I'm a situational leader. Explain what that means. Give an example really quick. Talk about how one guy came in and after the 12th time he used the phrase, I drive results. I just said, you drive results or do you inspire results? Because when I think of driving results, I think of Charlton Heston on the back of the chariot whipping the horses so he wins the race. That's driving. So be conscious, conscious of what you're saying. Be cautious of how you say it. Those are kind of important. Those are kind of important issues. So let's see. That's how you do that. Okay. Tell me about the interview course. Well, it's contained online, and it basically says that we're going to cover all the elements of the interview. We're going to do 5 in-depth mock interviews with feedback. Now, another benefit here is if you become a member of our your career community, $79 a month, you get a 45% discount, not 25%. So that's something additional you should consider. And again, this is something that's going to be in effect for the next 45 days. So if you struggled in the past, I can help you improve your interview skills. I've done it for a long, long time. I know what a good interview is, and I've certainly sat through a bunch of bad interviews. And there's nothing more painful. So I want to teach you how you can be a joy to interview, how you can become the kind of person everybody wants to hire. People that can come in and they've got great qualifications. They went to elite schools, but that's not going to get them the job. They're going to get the job because the employer trusts them, they like them, and that you appeal to what they're looking for. And how do you do that? With some stories and using some emotion. And because that's how they remember who you are. And when you're going to interview 10 or 12 people for a job, it all runs together. So you want to be memorable. Somebody once asked Steve Martin, how do you get into show business? And they want what they're really looking for, these great examples about you need an agent and you do this, and here's how you get your agent. And Steve Martin simply says, and I will say the same to you, be so good they can't ignore you. That's the secret. Be good at interviewing. Have a great resume. Be prepared. Have a great record. Be ready to talk about it as it relates to the client. Those are the key issues. I hope this has been helpful to you today. If you have any questions, please send me your emails at john@johngself.com. This presentation will remain on YouTube for the next 45 days. So if you have any questions and want to go back and look at it, it'll be available on YouTube for 45 days. Guiding Your Career, John G. Self. And if you would like to become a member of Your Career community, you can visit our website and click the membership icon button in the website. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to finish a few minutes in advance. That would shock my father, who once said this kid could chat up a brick wall. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing from you. Cheers, everybody.